Good evening, everybody. If you will, please open your Bibles up to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. So we're still in the Bible period of the Judges, but we're jumping over to 1 Samuel to finish up the last two Judges because their story is told in 1 Samuel. So who are the Judges? Starting with the first one. Yeah, all right, very good. We were going to stop there since we haven't talked about Eli yet, but that's great. Eli.
Just let them teach the class.
That's exactly right. Very good. That was great. So the Eli and Samuel are going to be dealt with in the book of 1 Samuel. We still have a few chapters left in the book of Judges. But at the end of the book of Judges, it's almost summary information. And they're tragic stories, and we will have to end with a tragic story when we get to the end of that. But let's look at Samuel here. And we're introduced to Samuel's father at first. It says in verse 1, "Now there was a certain man of Ramathaim Zophim of the mountains of Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah of Jehoram, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Ziph, an Ephraimite." All right, so where does he live at? What's the region that he lives at? Ephraim. All right, and so he's called an Ephraimite. I want to point this out because it's going to play into our story here. Normally, when we say someone's an Ephraimite, what do we mean by that? They're of the tribe of Ephraim. But in this case, he's not really of the tribe of Ephraim, at least when you look in 1 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 26 through 28, he's of the tribe of Levi. He's in the priestly lineage. Now, the Levites, did they all live in a certain area? No, they were spread out throughout the territory. This family, Elkanah's family, lives in the mountains of Ephraim, but he's a Levite, but because he's from that area, it's referred to here as an Ephraimite. So I point that out because an Ephraimite can mean they're from the tribe of Ephraim, which means could someone from the tribe of Ephraim be a priest? No. But a Levite who was living in the territory of Ephraim could be a priest. And so that'll factor in as we get into our story here. Anyway, Elkanah had two wives. By the way, thus far in our look at the Bible story, have we seen polygamy before? Have we seen a man with more than one wife before? We've seen lots of them, haven't we? How many stories have we seen that's been great? None of them. And that's really true. God hasn't pronounced any condemnation, at least openly, against this. But what we see is there's just problems and problems and problems. And guess what we're going to find in this story? Problems because of this. So he has two wives. The name of one was Hannah. The other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And so this is going to create a problem. Children, having the ability to have children was very important in ancient times. It's still important today. If you really want children and you can't have children, that's a big deal. In ancient times, it was a really big deal because the family heritage, lineage, promises, a lot of things came through the continuation of that family line. And so here, Hannah's not able to have children. Now, verse 3 says, "This man would go up year by year to worship and sacrifice to the Lord in Shiloh." Shiloh is where the tabernacle was located at this point. Now, during the days of the Judges, there were a lot of people doing what was right in their own eyes. But here's a man, and he's going to the tabernacle to worship. What would you think about this man, based upon this information we have so far? Seems to be a good guy. At least better than most at this point. And so he would go up every year to worship, and so he would go and make offerings, and he would give portions to Peninnah, his wife, and also to her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he would give a double portion, for he loved Hannah, although the Lord had closed her womb. This is the first indication I think we have of some problems here. Now, one wife was able to have children, and so he would give her a portion of the sacrifice. Remember, the sacrifices, when you'd go up for these feast days, you would eat that sacrifice, and it would be a celebration to the Lord. So he would give his wife Peninnah a portion. But then what would he give Hannah? Why? Because he loved her. Did he not love the other one? Do you see the problem here, though? And this is not the first time we've seen this. What's another occasion where we had a godly man who loved one wife and was okay to the other? Jacob. Yeah, Jacob. Yeah. And did somebody say something else? Yeah, with Rachel. That's right. Okay, and so here he would give a double portion, but then look at verse 6, and I want you to notice how the wording here is. Her rival also provoked her severely. Who's her rival? Yeah, isn't this sad? And provoked her severely to make her miserable because the Lord had closed her womb. And so here, I suppose, poking fun at her, mocking her by this. So it was year by year when she went up to the house of the Lord, she provoked her, therefore she wept, and she would not eat. So these feasts were to be a celebration to go and to give thanks to God for all that God had blessed them with. And what do these feasts represent to Hannah at this point? Misery. It's an opportunity for her rival to poke fun at her at this. And so here she is weeping at these celebrations. And you got anything you want to add to that? Anybody else at this point? Anything you want to add? So how does Elkanah feel about this? Oh, okay, Elkanah, the husband. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah, then 10 sons came. Am I not better than that? And but she's not feeling better just because of that. So Hannah rose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, and Eli the priest was sitting at the seat of the door of the post of the tabernacle of the Lord. So Eli is the priest. We're introduced to him here. He's also in the list of judges, second to the last judge. Here, his period as a judge, we have almost no information about him as far as what he actually did as a judge in delivering the children of Israel. We will have some information that we can kind of piece together about his character and some things of that nature. But at this point, he's priest. She comes to the tabernacle in bitterness of soul, verse 10 says, and she prays to the Lord and wept in anguish. And here is her prayer. Colby, do you mind reading verse 11?
Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant, and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. Okay, so she asked the Lord, she makes a vow, she said, Lord, if you will give me a male child, I will do what? I'll give him back to you. And there's a clue here in what she means by that. It seems to be the Nazirite vow. That's the only thing we know of. No razor shall come upon his head. And remember, during the Nazirite vow, a person was specially devoted to the Lord. So this child will be specially devoted to the Lord for how long? His whole life. Have we seen anybody else that's been the case of? Samson, it was supposed to be. Yeah, that's right. And so here, now that was the Lord's decision. Remember, an angel was sent to Samson's mother and said that she was not to drink strong drink or wine because he would be a Nazirite from the womb. Here, Hannah says, if you'll give me a child, I will devote him to the Lord his whole life. And so she prayed this. Now, it's interesting because it says how she's praying. She's praying and she's in anguish of spirit. And you could tell that something was going on because if you were just an observer, as Eli was an observer, what would you see? Yeah, she's moving her mouth, but you can't hear any words that's going on. And I think it's interesting the conclusion that Eli jumps to. What does Eli think when he sees her? She must be drunk. Were there a lot of drunk women wandering around the tabernacle? There may have been. Maybe this is an indication of kind of what things were like during this time. But he assumes that she must be drunk. And so he kind of rebukes her. Well, he does rebuke her here. He says in verse 14, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. And Hannah responds immediately and says, oh, no, Lord.
I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant a wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken until now. It becomes very apparent that she is sober, just as soon as she speaks here. And Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition which you have asked him. And she said, Let your maidservant find favor in your sight. Now, the last part of verse 18, what does it say? Does she have a child? Wasn't she sad about not having a child? And she still doesn't have a child? Why isn't she sad anymore? She has faith. She's turned it over to the Lord in this. Can you think of a passage that fits very well with, I think, what we're seeing here? If not, I'm about to give you one.
Be anxious for nothing.
Yeah, that's it. Be anxious for nothing. You said Philippians 4. Yeah, Philippians 4. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known to the Lord. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. I think that's exactly what we see here. She comes and she pours her petition. She's been fretting about this and worrying about this and sick about this. And she brings it to God and she says, look, here's the situation. If you'll grant this, then I will devote the child to you. And at that point, she allows that. She turns it over into God's hands and she goes away and she's no longer sorrowful. Let me ask you this. Do you think that if you prayed that prayer, could you have 100% confidence, no doubt, that you were going to have a son? No, I don't think so. That's exactly right.
That's why I started to ask you. Eli couldn't make that decision. He just told her to go to God. Now let it go.
I think that's right. I think what we see here is not that she has full assurance. But and the reason I say this, have you seen the name it and claim it gospel that is preached by so many? If you want something, you just tell the Lord to give it to you, and the Lord will give it to you, and you be confident in that. Don't you doubt one bit. I don't think the Lord works that way. The Lord wants us to pour out our petitions to Him and concerns to Him, and then leave it in His hands, and Thy will be done. And then that settles it. Whatever it is, if it's to give me a son, then let that be done. If it's not to give me a son, then let me find peace without having a son. And I think that's what's taking place here. Any thoughts or comments through verse 18? Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I think here's the, James talks about, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask, but let him not doubt. He who doubts, let not that man think that he'll receive anything of the Lord. I don't think I think we struggle between saying, well, I don't know if God is able to really do this. That's doubting, I think. I don't think it's doubting to say, I know the Lord can do this. I don't know if it's His will to do this. And so I pray that His will be done. And then be settled with that. And that's where the struggle, I think, comes in for me, is can I be at peace with the fact that God may say, no, I know you really want that, but that's not best for you. But then I look to the best example that we have, Jesus. Was there anything that He really wanted, that He petitioned the Father for 3 times? And what was the answer? No. But He committed Himself to Him who judges righteously. He committed Himself and said, I know that whatever He wants is going to be best. All right, verse 19. So they get up and they head back, and they go back to their house in Ramah. And Elkanah knew his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel. What does that mean? That's right. The name means heard of the Lord. The Lord heard me. And here was the evidence that the Lord heard her and answered her prayer. She has a male child. And so every year Elkanah would go up to offer the yearly sacrifice, but Hannah did not go. Why did she not go? Was that? That's right. Next time I go to the house of the Lord, I'm fulfilling this vow. And I'm going to wean him first. And the idea of weaning, I don't think, is just the idea of no longer nursing.
That word is used in this text, but I think it's the idea when the child is able to be away from his mother and be not necessarily self-sufficient, but able to be cared for by another. And so when that happens, I'll go. So it seems like it was probably at least probably a few years here where she was weaning the child. Now, when the child was, oh, by the way, her husband Elkanah, how does he feel about this? You know he's got to be excited to have a son through the wife that he loves. But what does he say? Yeah, you fulfill that vow. You keep that vow. Wait until you've weaned him, and then let the Lord establish His word. So when the child was weaned, she took him up it took him up, and with her 3 bulls, or does anybody have a translation that says a 3-year-old bull? I understand that you do. Okay, I understand the Hebrew here. It's difficult to translate whether it's talking about a 3-year-old bull or 3 bulls. New King James says 3 bulls, an ephah of flour, a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. The child was young. They slaughtered the bull and they brought it to Eli. I wonder if Eli remembers this situation because some time has passed at this point. And so they bring the child to Eli, and she says, "Oh, my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here and prayed to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord granted me my petition, which I asked him. Therefore I have also," New King James says, "lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord." And so they worship there. Anybody have a different word than lent? Dedicated. Yeah, I like that term better. Lent, if somebody loans you something, it's like you got to give it back. And I don't think this was the idea. And she says as long as your child lives. But it's the idea the Lord gave him to me. I'm giving him back to the Lord. I'm devoting him or dedicating him to the Lord. I wonder about Eli. How would you feel? Eli's an older man now. How would you feel if somebody showed up and said, "Hey, prayed for a child, gave me the child. Child's 2 now. Here you go." I vowed that I was going to give it to the Lord. So raise my son. That's the task that Eli is given here in raising up Samuel. But he seems to embrace this. Here is one that is devoted to the Lord. Now, this is a very interesting dynamic here. Because here's a man raising this child who's going to turn out to be a very godly person. Samuel's going to be a very godly person. Eli seems to have been a godly person. But Eli's already had one experience with raising some children. He's already got older children. How did that go? It did not go well. It did not go well. And we're going to get to learn some parenting tips from this story in this. But he's going to get another opportunity with Samuel. And it's a combination probably of maybe better parenting, but also Samuel himself in realizing his devotion. It's a fascinating study to look and to see how people turn out when expectation is placed upon them from the beginning. Alexander the Great had an incredible confidence that he was going to be conqueror of the world. On the night that he was born, there was a great fire that created a glow in the sky. And when the oracle saw the glow, they took it as an omen that this child was going to be a great conqueror of the world. Guess what Alexander the Great grew up hearing? You are going to be a great conqueror of the world. Guess what he grew up to do? Be a great conqueror of the world. General MacArthur, from the time that he was little bitty, his parents told him that he was going to be a great general. And he grew up to be a great general. And you can just go through and look, read biographies, and you'll just see it over and over and over again, if that's the case. Samuel, from the time that he could understand, knew that he was specially devoted to the work of the Lord. I wonder if that made any difference in the course that he took in life. And also maybe the way that Eli raised him. I don't know that Eli raised his sons as you're going to be specially devoted to the Lord, although they should have been raised that way. Why? What were they? They were priests. But it doesn't seem that he raised them that way. But it does seem that Eli was raised that way. So that's just some food for thought there. Anybody have anything through chapter 1 that you'd like to add?
I think that's exactly right. Very good. Excellent point. Excellent point. Anything else? All right. Hannah's prayer is interesting here. I'm not going to get into this. I'll let Larson talk. Larson does a much better job talking about this. The structure of the book. You notice that in chapter 2 you have Hannah's prayer. In chapter 23 at the end of the book you have David's prayer. And if you compare those two prayers, there's a lot of symmetry in that. And it's interesting they kind of bookend this book. And it was probably written that way on purpose. But notice the content of this prayer. Do you mind reading this prayer starting in verse 2 through 10?
Okay.
Through 1, I guess.
And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoices in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is the God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty men are broken, and those who stumbled are girded with strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and she who has many children has become feeble. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. He raises the poor from the dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set them among princes and make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. He will guard the feet of his saints, but the wicked shall be silent in darkness, for by strength no man shall prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces. From heaven he will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed.
Very good. Thank you. So what stands out to you in this prayer? It's a song, but it's a song to the Lord. What stands out to you in this? What are some of the major themes that you see here?
Praise to God for everything that He has done, from the creation of the earth to being a righteous God. Like in verse 6, the Lord killeth and maketh alive, He bringeth down the grave, He bringeth up, He maketh poor, He maketh rich, He bringeth up, He lifteth up. So God's in control of everything.
God's in control of everything. Very good. Major point there. What else? You see anything else?
Another thing, it says, my horn is exalted in the Lord from its strength.
Yes, that's right. Her strength comes from God. Jesus said, the first shall be last and the last first. Notice how many times that theme comes up throughout the Scripture. Whoever exalts himself will be, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. All right, out of these two, out of Hannah and her rival, who had exalted themselves? Peninnah, yeah. Who had humbled themselves? Hannah. What had the Lord done? Are we reading a lot about Peninnah and her children? No. And so there's this recognition that if we will depend upon the Lord, if we will trust in Him, He's the one that has all power. That's the reason why we can be anxious for nothing. But in all things, we can go to Him in prayer and make our petitions known with thanksgiving, and we can have peace that surpasses all understanding because we're asking a God who can do whatever needs to be done. And He's willing to listen to the humble. He's willing to listen to the one in need. And so there's this beautiful picture here of here's someone that's weak, that is helpless in this situation. She goes to God, and God's willing to help. That's the same way that David felt about God. And that's the same way that godly people feel about God. Anything you want to add through verse 10?
In verse 5, where it says, the barren hath borne 7, and she that had many children is waxed feeble.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean Hannah went on to have more children?
Hannah does go on to have more children. I don't know that she had 7. I think she's going to have, believe it or not, she's going to end up having 6. She has 3 more sons and 2 daughters. So she had a total of 6, one shy of that. So I don't know that she meant that literally. I think she meant that poetically. I don't know that Peninnah then lost all of her children. But I think that the idea is that the Lord was able to exalt her, and the one who would boast and poke fun and that type of thing would be silenced in that. Good question, though. That's right. Yes. That's exactly right. Good point. Any other comments? All right. So verse 11, Elkanah went to his house in Ramah, but the child ministered to the Lord before Eli the priest. So what is Samuel doing? I didn't hear you. What? What's Samuel doing? He's ministering. Before who? Before the Lord. And before, to the Lord rather, before Eli the priest. So he's working in the tabernacle there, assisting Eli in his work as the priest during this time. So he's growing up doing that. By the way, I'll just point out this, just interesting note. Verse 10 is the first time that we see the word Messiah in the Hebrew used, where it says he gives strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. That's the first time that we see that word used, and it's going to be used a lot from here on out. And looking forward to the one that the Lord's going to anoint to be king over all. And this was during the days of the judges, not during the days of the kings. So that's interesting. That's kind of prophetic there of what's going to take place. Okay, well, now let's shift gears. We've seen something encouraging here. We've seen a person who put their faith in the Lord, and the Lord has blessed them in that. We see the character of the Lord in here. But now we switch gears and we look at the sons of Eli. And verse 12 says, the sons of Eli were corrupt. They did not know the Lord. Very disappointing, since their father was the priest, and they are serving as priests. And for sake of time, I'm going to summarize this. So you remember that with every sacrifice that you would offer, part of it belonged to the priest. That was God's law. That's how God supported the Levites in their work of ministering to the people for the Lord. And so if I came and I brought a bull and I offered that bull, most of the flesh would belong to me unless it was a whole burnt offering. Most of the flesh would be for my family to celebrate, to celebrate the feast to the Lord. But part of it would be given to, a portion of it would be given to the priest. And the priest would use that to support his family. But now, what these priests are doing are not taking the portion that the law said. What they would do is they would come and get the part that they wanted. So you deer hunters, what part of the deer would you want? You want the tenderloin or the backstrap maybe, you know. And so give me that piece. Well, that's not what the law said. And they would come. And then also something else, the law said that part of it was to be burnt. The fat was to be burnt on the altar as a portion to God. But you know, in ancient times, we don't feel this way as much today, but people wanted the fat. The fat was where the most calories were. And that's what you wanted. And so you know what these priests were doing? Eli's sons? They were coming saying, give me that piece and give me the fat. And the people were saying, whoa, 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 whoa. The fat needs to be offered to the Lord. That's the whole reason we came to offer this, was to offer this to the Lord. You can't take the part that specifically belongs to the Lord and take it for yourself. And you know what these priests would say? You're going to give it to me or else. And so they were given to it. How do you think people felt when they make a trip of miles on foot to come and offer a sacrifice to the Lord, and they get there to offer the sacrifice to the Lord, and they can't even offer the sacrifice the way the law says because of a corrupt priest who they brought the sacrifice to, who were supposed to be ministering on their behalf? How would you feel about that? You go up for the feast of Passover, and this happens to you. And then it's time for the feast of harvest. And you say, well, we're going back to Shiloh for the feast of harvest? I don't think I'm going back there. Last time we went there, those corrupt priests, They didn't even let us offer it the way it's supposed to be offered. And so notice what verse 17 says. Therefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred offering of the Lord. When God's people sin and it's tolerated and it's allowed, what it does is it turns people away from serving the Lord. That makes sense, doesn't it? That's what's happening in the days of the judges. Eli's sons are giving us some indication what happens when people do what's right in their own eyes. Anything you want to add?
He says they don't know the Lord, so Eli wasn't even teaching them, obviously. He was just doing his job. As far as inside the temple, he wasn't even teaching them.
That may be right. Yeah, that may be right. Now, you're right. It says they don't know the Lord. Whether that means, I mean, here's the thing. We all know that there are people who have been taught that don't know the Lord. So it is possible that he did teach them and they just didn't follow his teaching on that, so they don't know the Lord in that sense. But I also think it's possible that he didn't do a good job of teaching them because the Lord is going to lay the blame on him for their conduct.
You know, people today that coach or something like that, and they didn't know they go in and do their job, if they're not teaching their family.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. We probably all know occasions of where here's a judge and he's got children that are outlaws. Something like that. It's like, this man knows the law. He's supposed to be teaching. If he's not teaching his own family the law. Yeah, same concept there. Very good. All right, look at verse 18. But, contrast, Samuel ministered before the Lord even when he was a little child wearing a linen ephod. And so you have Eli's sons corrupt before the Lord, don't know the Lord, profaning the name of the Lord. You have Samuel ministering before the Lord even as a child. And every year his mother would bring him a robe. And Eli, here's where we have the information about her other children. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, the Lord give you descendants from this woman for the loan that was lent to the Lord. And they would go on their way. And the Lord visited Hannah so that she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And meanwhile, the child Samuel grew before the Lord. So we're just getting a summary here of what is going on. Now, verse 22, Eli was old, and he heard everything that his sons did to all Israel. What have we heard so far that they've been doing to Israel? Stealing. Yeah, stealing what belonged to the Lord. Stealing what belonged to the Lord. But here we find out something else. How they lay with the women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Talk about abuse of power. The priests were in a position to lead the people in God's word, to lead the people in worshiping God. They were to live off of the offerings that were given. But these priests are abusing their power in every way. They're taking what doesn't belong to them from the offerings, and the ones who are coming to worship and devote themselves to the Lord, they're preying upon them sexually. They're being impure with the women who assembled at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Eli hears this. Eli says to them, listen to his rebuke here. Would you read 23 and 24?
So he said to them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings from all the people. No, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people transgress.
25 also, I'm sorry.
If one man sins against another, God will judge him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him? Nevertheless, they did not heed the voice of their father because the Lord desired to kill them.
Okay, so when Eli hears about this, did he say, ask my boys? No. Is he disturbed by this? Does he talk to them about it? Does he tell them it's wrong? He does. Do you feel like this was an appropriate way to deal with this? No, it's not an appropriate way. Why is it not an appropriate way to deal with this?
Supposed to be put to death.
Yes, they were. They were to be put to death. That's exactly right.
This was a sin that everybody was seeing.
Everybody. Absolutely. Who's in the position to do something about this? Eli is. He's acting, he's the high priest and he's the judge at this time. But these are his sons. These are his boys. And he doesn't like it. It's shameful that they're doing this. And so he rebukes them. He says, I'm telling you, this is not good. What you're doing is not good. The Lord's going to hold you accountable for this. It's not good. But that wasn't enough. What do you think he should have done? All right, so we already said the law said they should be put to death. All right. I think that at the very, very least, you cannot serve as priest here. You cannot serve as priest. But that didn't take place. That didn't take place. Any thoughts before we move further?
Well, he said here that Samuel was Levi. He wasn't a priest. Was he so? How was he being well, he wasn't a Levite. Was he a Levite?
That's what I was saying earlier. Remember, he's from Ephraim, but he's not of the tribe of Ephraim. He is a Levite. Yes. And that's how that ties in. So you bringing that up is good because that shows how it ties in. Because as we start off, if we were just reading from the book of 1 Samuel, we may assume he was an Ephraimite. And it's like, well, wait a minute. How is he able to serve as a priest? Because he's from Ephraim. But he's not from the tribe of Ephraim. He just lived in Ephraim's territory. Very good. All right. Anything else before we go further? Contrast Eli's son Samuel. The child Samuel grew in stature, both in favor both of the Lord and men. By the way, a very similar statement is made of Jesus as Jesus grew up, that he grew physically, he grew in wisdom, knowledge, and the favor of God and men. So he's growing up in all the ways that a boy should grow up. Verse 27, a man of God comes to Eli, and he said to him, Thus says the Lord, did I not clearly reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt in Pharaoh's house? Did I not choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be the priest, to be my priest, and to offer upon my altar, to burn incense, and to wear the ephod before me? And did I not give to the house of your father all offerings of the children of Israel made by fire? And the answer to all that is yes. God had really blessed the tribe of Levi and the house of Aaron to serve as priests, and he had given them special privileges. And so with special privileges comes what? That's right. Very good. All you Spider-Man fans out there. And so verse 29, or 29, why did you kick at my sacrifice and my offering, which I have commanded in my habitation? How did he kick at his offering and his sacrifices?
He allowed it to be used by his sons. He didn't let it not be used by his sons.
Exactly. Notice how it's worded there in verse 29. What does it say? You honored your sons more than me, to make yourself fat with the best of all the offerings of my people. I don't know that Eli was doing what they were doing. I don't think that he was. I don't think he was going and taking, give me that portion, and I want the fat too. I don't know that he was doing that. But he knew his sons were, and he didn't do anything about it. And God said, you were in a position to do something about it. You hold responsibility for this. And you honored your sons more than me. I want to contrast that with someone. We'll talk about this in the invitation here in just a little bit. Eli knew what his sons were doing. He didn't condone what they were doing, but he also didn't do what he could do to prevent that. Who should have he had greater respect for than his sons? The Lord. But he didn't, and it's obvious that he didn't, because when he knew that they were offending the Lord, he still allowed them to continue to do that. So it's obvious that his real devotion, his real loyalty was for his children, not for the Lord. Abraham. Any question where Abraham's allegiance and loyalty was? No doubt. How do we know that? That's right. Go and offer him as a burnt offering on Mount Moriah. Abraham arises early in the morning and goes to offer his son. And God says, now I know that you fear me. Now I know you fear me. Here was a test for Eli, and Eli fails the test. Parents, we will be tested. We will be tested whether we honor the Lord more than we honor our children. I don't know how that test will be, but the time will come where we will be tested, where our true allegiance is. Whether we care more about our children's feelings or we care more about the Lord's feelings. Whether we are more willing to grieve the Lord or willing to grieve our children. There will be those moments. And I believe it's a test. I believe the Lord is looking to see Do you fear me? Do you love me? Do you honor me more than your children? And so we need to make sure we know where our allegiance is, where our loyalty is. By the way, when Abraham offered Isaac, was it still in the best interest of Isaac? If Eli would have dealt with this the way that he should have dealt with it, would it still been in the best interest of Hophni and Phinehas? Yes, it would have been. By putting the Lord first, we do what's best for our family as well. And he destroyed his family. His children are going to die in rebellion to the Lord because he didn't put them first. Or he didn't put the Lord first. He put them first. And that was the cause of that. So a pretty powerful lesson here. I don't think that's the main point of the book of 1 Samuel. But you see what's taking place here. And you learn from that. And so I always say, if you've got great examples around you, wonderful, learn from them. If you don't, you've got great examples in here. If you can't learn from the failure of the people around you, at least learn from the failure of the people that God recorded in here. I think that's the reason why these stories are here, is it helps us to learn from that so that we don't have to make those same mistakes. Any comments that you'd like to make? Okay, so let's move forward and we'll finish chapter 2 tonight. So you have honored your sons more than me, to make yourself fat with the best of the offerings of my people. Therefore, the Lord God of Israel says, I said indeed that your house and the house of your father would walk before me forever. But now the Lord says, far be it from me. For those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days are coming when I will cut off your arm and the arm of your father's house, so that there will not be an old man in your house, and you will see an enemy in my habitation, despite all the good which God does for Israel. And there shall not be an old man there shall not be an old man in your house forever. But any of your men whom I do not cut off from my altar shall consume your eyes and grieve your heart. All the descendants of your house shall die in the flower of their age. Now this shall be a sign to you, and it shall come to pass, yet your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, in one day shall die, both of them. And I will raise up for myself a faithful priest, who shall do according to what is in my heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before my anointed forever. And it shall come to pass that everyone who is left in your house will come and bow down to him for a piece of silver and a morsel of bread, and say, please put me in one of the priestly positions that I may eat a piece of bread. You honor your sons more than you honor me. How's that going to turn out for your family? Disaster. Disaster. And I do think that there's a principle there. All right, last 2 minutes. Share with me anything you'd like to share with me regarding this text. We covered it pretty well. All right. But we do see the contrast here. We see the wickedness of the priest. We see how the people are turning away from the Lord because of the wickedness of the priest. But what's our bright spot right now? Samuel is. And he's ministering before the Lord. And the people are going to see, here's a righteous man. And that's going to encourage them. And that will strengthen them in their service to the Lord. Okay, we'll pick up in chapter 3 next time. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.